It's funny. I was in the kitchen the other night just chopping vegetables. And, of course, I nicked my finger. Nothing serious, but you get that immediate, welling up of red.
The inevitable kitchen injury.
Right. And my first instinct is always just grab a paper towel, squeeze it, and forget it exists. It's just the red stuff, the stuff that's supposed to stay on the inside.
It's a leak. You plug the leak so you can get back to what you were doing. That's how we all think of it.
Exactly. But I've been spending the last week with this incredible set of hematology notes you sent over. And calling it a set of notes is an understatement. This is a textbook.
It's pretty comprehensive.
And it completely shattered my mental model. I always thought of blood as, radiator fluid for the body. It just circulates, carries some stuff around.
Yeah, that's a common analogy. But it really sells it short.
It's not a fluid at all. I mean, it is, but that's not the point. It's a logistics network. It's FedEx. It's Amazon Prime.
That is a much, much better way to think about it. It's a massive industrial transport system.
A system with its own factories, which, and we have to get into this, physically move locations as you develop.
They do. It's fascinating.
It has its own specialized workers.
Yeah.
A brutal quality control department that just destroys defective products.
It's a spleen, a ruthless inspector.
And it all tells a story. So that's our mission today. We're going to dive deep into these notes and decode the secret language of blood. We want to get way beyond just red blood cells carry oxygen.
We want to understand the how the body runs this massive company, how it prioritizes survival, and what it means when a cell shows up to work shaped like a target.
Or a teardrop. And you caught my attention with this one, how a simple breakdown in the biochemical assembly line might, and I can't believe I'm saying this, explain the legend of the werewolf.
Oh, it's my favorite little corner of biochemistry. It's where science and folklore collide.
It's incredible. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start this deep dive at the very beginning, the origin story.
Let's do it.
You mentioned factories. When I think of my body, I think of my organs as being, stationary. My heart is here. My liver is here. They don't pack up and move to Florida for the winter.
Generally not, no. Your kidneys don't decide to summer in your shoulders.
But the notes talk about hematopoiesis, the creation of blood. And they say this factory, this manufacturing plant, it actually migrates.
It does. And it's a brilliant solution to a problem of, real estate. Think about a fetus. It's building an entire body from scratch.
Right. You're just a blueprint turning into a building.
Exactly. And in those very early stages, you don't really have sturdy, hollowed out bones yet. So there's no bone marrow. The factory needs a temporary headquarters.
So where does it set up shop first?
For the first 2 months, from 0 to about 2 months of gestation, the whole operation runs out of the yolk sac.
The yolk sac. That sounds so primitive, almost reptilian.
It is. It's the earliest, most basic structure available. And its job is just to churn out the absolute bare minimum of red cells to keep the embryo oxygenated. It's not making fancy immune cells. It's just trying to keep the lights on.
A pop-up shop.
A pop-up shop is the perfect analogy. But the fetus outgrows that space incredibly quickly. It needs to scale up. It needs a real industrial complex.
So it moves.
It moves. Around month 2, it shuts down the yolk sac operation and transfers everything to the liver.
The liver. The organ I associate with filtering toxins becomes the blood factory.
For the whole middle part of pregnancy, yes, the liver is the primary factory. The spleen and lymph nodes also chip in, sort of like subcontractors on the big project.
And is that why the liver is so disproportionately large in a fetus?
That's a huge part of it, yes. It's doing double duty. It's learning its main job of detoxification while also being this bustling factory pumping out millions and millions of blood cells.
Okay, so we've gone from the pop-up shop in the yolk sac to the regional headquarters in the liver.
Right. But even that isn't the final destination. As you get toward the end of pregnancy, around 7 to 9 months, the bones are finally hardening. They're calcifying. They're forming these protected, hollow cavities inside.
The bone marrow.
The ultimate fortress. The body essentially decides, okay, the liver has its own important jobs to do. We've built the permanent, secure facility now. And so the entire operation moves one last time.
Into the bone marrow. And that's where it stays.
That is where it stays for the rest of your life. That's the permanent home of hematopoiesis.
Well, mostly. Because the notes make a very interesting distinction between red marrow and yellow marrow. It seems like even within the bones, the factory downsizes as we get older.
It absolutely does. When you're a child, you're in a phase of rapid growth. You need a massive oxygen carrying capacity. So pretty much all of your bones are filled with active blood-producing red marrow.
So my femur, my shin bones, when I was 5, They were all churning out blood cells.
Your whole skeleton was a factory. But as an adult, your needs change. You're not growing anymore. You can consolidate the operation.
So what happens to the extra factory space?
It gets converted. The marrow in your long bones, your femur, your humerus in your arm, it retires. The hematopoietic tissue is replaced by fat.
Fat. Seriously?
Yes. That's what yellow marrow is. It's adipose tissue. It's essentially a retirement community for that bone space. It's quiet, inactive tissue.
So my thigh bones are just storage space now.
For the most part, yes. In a healthy adult, the active assembly line is restricted to what we call the flat bones.
Which are?
The skull, the sternum, your breastbone, the ribs, the vertebrae in your spine, and the pelvis.
So if I tap my chest right now, right here, under my sternum, that's where my blood is being born.
Right now, as we're speaking, millions of cells are dividing and maturing in that exact spot. It is a beehive of constant activity.
That is an incredible thing to visualize.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established the factory floor. Let's talk about the products, the cells themselves. I was looking at this chart in the notes, blood cell maturation, and it looks like a massive, complicated family tree.
It is a family tree. And like any good family tree, it starts with a single common ancestor. In this case, it's the multipotent stem cell.
The notes have it labeled as CFUGEMM, which sounds like a call sign for a radio station. You're listening to 99.3 CFUGEMM.
It is a mouthful, I'll give you that. It stands for colony-forming unit, granulocyte, erythrocyte, monocyte, megakaryocyte.
Okay, let's just call it the grandfather cell.
The grandfather cell works perfectly. This cell is multipotent, which means it has potential. It has options. It sits there waiting for orders from the body.
And depending on the chemical signals it receives, it decides what kind of cell to become.
Pretty nicely. It can go down one of two main paths.
Yeah.
Broadly, you have the myeloid line and the lymphoid line. The lymphoid gives you your lymphocytes, but the myeloid line is where most of the action is.
And the myeloid line gives us pretty much everything else.
A huge range. It gives you your white blood cells for fighting bacteria, the neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, and your platelets.
Platelets. The notes say they come from something called a megakaryocyte.
Yes, and mega is definitely the right word. These are gigantic cells that live in the bone marrow. And to make platelets, they don't divide in a normal way.
What do?
They essentially shed. They extend these long arms of cytoplasm into the blood vessels, and the force of the blood flow rips off little pieces.
So platelets are just shrapnel.
Yeah.
Little bits of a bigger cell.
Functional shrapnel, yes. They're like little sticky patches that float around waiting to plug a leak.
That is absolutely metal. Okay, but let's focus on the other branch for a minute, the erythroid line, the path to becoming a red blood cell.
The journey of the erythrocyte.
I noticed a really clear trend in the illustrations. Usually when things grow up, they get bigger. A person, a tree. But these cells, they get smaller.
That is one of the absolute key trends. It's counterintuitive, but it's central to the process. It starts big and gets small.
Okay, walk me through the stages. The first one is a rubroblast.
You start with a rubroblast. It's the baby. It's the largest cell in the series. It has a huge active nucleus, and if you stain it, its cytoplasm is a deep royal blue.
Blue. Why blue? I thought blood was red.
The mature cell is red because it's packed with hemoglobin. The baby cell is blue because it's packed with ribosomes and RNA. It's a protein-building factory. That machinery stains blue.
So blue means it's busy building.
Blue is the color of construction. Then, as it matures, it goes from rubroblast to prorubrocyte, then rubrocyte. A few things happen simultaneously.
Okay, what's trend number one?
Trend 1. The cell shrinks with each division. It gets small and smaller.
And two.
Trend 2. The color of the cytoplasm changes. As it produces more and more hemoglobin, which is a red-pink protein, and gets rid of the blue RNA, the cell's color shifts from blue to a sort of grayish-purple, and finally to the classic pinkish-red of a mature cell.
Okay, smaller and pinker. What's the third trend? This is the most dramatic one.
The third and most critical step is the eviction.
The eviction. It kicks out its own nucleus.
It does. At the metarubrocyte stage, the nucleus has condensed down into a tiny, hard, dark ball. The cell then actively pushes it to the edge of the membrane and expels it. That's insane. Why? Almost every other cell in the body would die without its nucleus. It's the brain.
It is the brain.
Yeah.
But a red blood cell has only one very specific job.
Yeah.
Carry the maximum amount of oxygen possible. And the nucleus is just dead weight. It's taking up valuable cargo space.
To be the most efficient delivery truck, you have to get rid of the driver's seat.
That's the logic. It sacrifices its brain and its ability to repair itself or reproduce, all for that extra little bit of hemoglobin carrying capacity.
So once the nucleus is gone, what's left?
What's left is called a reticulocyte. It's almost mature. It still has a tiny bit of that blue RNA left, which you can see with a special stain. It hangs out in the bone marrow for another day or two, then squeezes into the bloodstream.
And then it becomes the final product.
After about a day in circulation, it loses the last of its RNA and becomes a mature erythrocyte, a biconcave disc that is essentially just a flexible bag of hemoglobin.
A brainless zombie cell just doing its job.
Drifting on the currents for 120 days, doing its one job perfectly until it wears out and gets recycled by the spleen. Speaking of that one job carrying oxygen, this is the perfect transition to the chemistry of breath. The cell is just the truck, but the actual cargo container is the hemoglobin molecule.
Hemoglobin is the absolute star of the show, and building it is a masterpiece of biochemistry. The notes break it down really well. You need two main components. You need iron, and you need a molecule called protoporphyrin.
Protoporphyrin's a great word.
It is, and the pathway to make it is, well, it's a little notorious in medical school for its complexity. It's called the delta pathway of heme precursors. It starts with delta-aminolevulinic acid.
Whoa, okay, you're already giving me flashbacks to organic chemistry class.
Stay with me. The names themselves aren't as important as the sequence and the fact that a problem at any step can cause huge trouble. But the notes provided a fantastic mnemonic for this.
Oh, I saw this and I laughed out loud. It's very aggressive.
It's memorable because it's so strange. While in the delta, pour your cop pronto, a cup of heme.
Pour your cop pronto. It sounds like a line from a gritty detective movie.
But it works. Let's break it down. Delta stands for delta-aminolevulinic acid. POR is for porphobilinogen. UR is for uroporphyrinogen.
Hmm?
COP is for coproporphyrinogen. Pronto is for protoporphyrin, and that combines with iron to make heme.
Delta, pour, your, cop, pronto, heme. It actually works. It sticks in your brain. But this is where it gets really, really interesting. This is where we get to the monster hiding in the biochemistry.
Yes, the porphyrias.
This is what happens when that assembly line breaks down, right?
Exactly. Imagine the delta pathway is a conveyor belt. Each step is overseen by a specific worker, an enzyme that converts one molecule to the next. A porphyria is a genetic disease where one of those enzymes is missing or defective.
So the conveyor belt jams.
It jams, and the product on the belt just starts piling up before the jam.
And these precursor molecules, these porphyrins, they aren't harmless when they build up.
Not at all. They're actually quite toxic in high concentrations. And depending on where the enzyme is broken, where the jam occurs, you get a different set of symptoms.
Okay, so what happens if the blockage is early in the pathway?
If the buildup is of the very early precursors, like delta-ALA and porphobilinogen, you tend to get severe abdominal pain and profound neuropsychiatric symptoms.
Like what?
We're talking anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations, what historically would have just been called madness. King George III, the Mad King of England, is widely thought to have had an acute intermittent porphyria.
Wow. But what if the blockage is later in the chain?
This is where the werewolf legend comes in. If the blockage is later, you get a buildup of molecules like uroporphyrinogen. And these compounds have a peculiar property. They are photosensitive.
No sensitive, so they react to light.
They react powerfully to UV light. When they accumulate in the skin and that person is exposed to sunlight, it triggers a chemical reaction that severely damages the skin cells.
So sunlight burns them.
Not like a sunburn. We're talking immediate painful blistering, swelling, and eventually severe scarring. Patients with these cutaneous porphyrias learn very quickly to avoid the sun at all costs.
Okay, let's step into a time machine. We're in a small village in medieval Europe. There's someone in town who only ever comes out at night.
Because the day is agony for them.
Their face is scarred from previous exposures, which might pull their lips back, making their teeth seem more prominent, more like fangs.
And another symptom that can happen is hypertrichosis, excessive hair growth on the face and arms, especially in response to that chronic skin damage.
So they avoid the sun, they have fangs, and they're hairy. The picture's getting pretty clear.
And here's the absolute kicker. To get rid of these excess porphyrins, the body dumps them into the urine. And these porphyrin compounds are a deep, dark, red-purple color.
The notes call it port wine-colored urine.
Exactly. So imagine you're a superstitious villager. You see this person. They look strange. They're hairy. They only come out at night. And you see their chamber pot, and it looks like it's full of blood.
You don't think metabolic waste. You think he's drinking blood?
You think monster, you think werewolf, or vampire. The legends get intertwined, but it's a direct line from a specific enzyme deficiency to a powerful and enduring myth.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. It reframes folklore as a history of undiagnosed medical conditions.
In many cases, I think that's exactly what it is.
So sticking with the chemistry of hemoglobin, we've got the protoporphyrin ring. Now we need to talk about its partner, iron.
Iron, the elemental core of our ability to breathe.
And reading the notes, the body seems almost paranoid about iron. It's handled like nuclear material.
It has to be. Iron is a classic double-edged sword. It's absolutely essential for life. It's the atom that physically binds to oxygen, but free iron is incredibly toxic.
Why is it toxic?
It's a potent generator of free radicals through something called the Fenton reaction. A free iron atom bouncing around in your cell is like a spark in a fireworks factory. It just causes damage everywhere. So the body's rule is iron never walks alone.
It always has a chaperone. An escort.
Always. There's no such thing as free iron in a healthy body. It is always bound to a protein.
So what are the main proteins involved? The notes list a few. Ferritin.
Ferritin is the main storage protein. You can think of it as the iron warehouse. It's a hollow, ball-shaped protein that can safely pack away thousands of iron atoms inside of it, keeping them from causing trouble.
Okay, so that's the warehouse. What about transferrin?
The name gives it away. It transfers iron. If ferritin is the warehouse, transferrin is the armored truck that moves iron through the bloodstream from, say, your gut where you absorbed it, to the bone marrow factory where it's needed.
So storage and transport. Then there's a third one mentioned, hemosiderin.
Hemosiderin is, let's call it the long-term, deep storage. It's what happens when the ferritin warehouses are completely full. The body starts packing iron into these less organized, water-insoluble clumps.
It sounds less ideal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's much harder to get the iron back out of hemosiderin. It's like putting your stuff in a storage unit in another state. You know it's there, but it's not easily accessible.
And what happens if even that overflows? If you have way too much iron?
That's a very dangerous situation called iron overload. The notes mention the terms hemosiderosis and, more severely, hemochromatosis.
Why is it so dangerous?
Because the body has no good way to get rid of excess iron. We can't actively excrete it. We only lose tiny amounts when we shed skin or bleed. So if you absorb too much due to a genetic condition or too many blood transfusions, it has nowhere to go.
So it just gets deposited in organs?
Yes, it starts to build up in the liver, the heart, the pancreas, and it's still toxic. It literally causes those organs to rust from the inside out, leading to organ failure.
Wow. Okay, so balance is absolutely critical. We've built the hemoglobin molecule, we've managed our iron supply, and we've managed to avoid turning into werewolves. Now let's talk about how this molecule actually behaves, the oxygen dynamics.
This is where we get into the, for lack of a better word, the personality of hemoglobin.
A personality. It's a protein.
But it's a responsive one. It changes its behavior based on its environment. The scientific term for this is allosteric modulation, but the notes describe it with the famous hemoglobin-oxygen dissociation curve.
Which looks like a scary graph from a physics textbook, an S shape.
It does, but the concept behind it is actually pretty simple. Remember, hemoglobin has two opposing jobs. Job 1, pick up oxygen in the lungs and hold on tight. Job 2, go to the tissues and let that oxygen go.
Hold on, let go. A fundamental conflict.
Right. And you don't want it to do both jobs with equal strength everywhere in the body. You want it to be really clingy with oxygen in the lungs and very generous with oxygen in, say, a muscle that's working hard.
So it needs to adapt to its location.
It adapts. And this adaptation is what we call a shift in the curve. We talk about a shift to the left and a shift to the right.
Okay, let's break that down. What does a shift to the left mean in practical terms?
A shift to the left means hemoglobin has an increased affinity for oxygen. It holds on tighter. Think left is love. It loves oxygen and won't let it go.
So it picks it up in the lungs great, but then it fails at the second half of its job. It doesn't deliver it to the tissues.
Precisely. The tissues can be starving for oxygen, but the hemoglobin just sails past, holding on to its precious cargo.
What kind of conditions would cause that?
The notes list the classic causes. Low carbon dioxide, high pH, which is alkalosis, and low body temperature. Think of a body that's cold and at rest. Its metabolic demands are low, so it doesn't need to dump oxygen as readily.
But there's one really specific example of a left shift. There's not a pathology, but a design feature. Hemoglobin F.
Fetal hemoglobin. Yes, this is one of the most elegant designs in all of biology.
So set the scene. A fetus is in the womb. It can't breathe air. It has to get its oxygen from the mother's blood across the placenta.
Right. It's essentially a parasite from a biological standpoint. It's stealing resources.
So if the baby's hemoglobin had the same affinity, the same stickiness as the mom's hemoglobin, there's no reason for the oxygen to jump ship.
Exactly. It would be a 50-50 toss-up. Not good enough for survival. The baby needs an unfair advantage.
It needs a stronger magnet.
Bingo. Fetal hemoglobin is structurally different from adult hemoglobin, and that difference gives it a higher affinity for oxygen. It has a natural built-in shift to the left compared to the mother's blood.
So when the mother's red blood cell goes past the placenta,
The fetal hemoglobin literally rips the oxygen away from the maternal hemoglobin. It says, I want this more than you do. It is biochemical theft, and it is absolutely essential for life.
that is incredible. Okay, so that's the clingy left shift. What about a right shift?
A right shift is the opposite. Hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen decreases. It gets worse at holding on. It becomes generous and lets go of oxygen much more easily.
And the context for this is when your tissues are desperate for oxygen, like exercise.
Exactly. Let's imagine you're sprinting. Think about the environment inside your quadriceps muscle. What's it like?
Okay, well, it's getting hot.
High temperature? That causes a right shift. What else?
It's producing waste, lactic acid, so it's becoming more acidic.
Right, the pH is dropping. Low pH, or acidosis, causes a right shift.
And it's burning fuel and producing carbon dioxide.
High CO2, another cause of a rate shift. All three of those signals, heat, acid, CO2, are screaming to the passing red blood cell, we are working hard, we need oxygen now.
And the hemoglobin molecule responds by letting go of its cargo right where it's needed most.
It's a perfectly responsive delivery system, and there's one other molecule mentioned in the notes that helps with this, 2,3-DPG.
Sounds like a Star Wars droid.
It's a small molecule made inside the red blood cell during its own metabolism, and 2,3-DPG's job is to wedge itself into the hemoglobin molecule and sort of pry its fingers open, forcing it to release oxygen.
So more DPG means more oxygen release.
Correct. So if you have a condition where your body is chronically low on oxygen, say you move to a high-altitude city like Denver, your red blood cells will start producing more 2,3-DPG.
To make sure that what little oxygen you do get from the thin air is delivered to your tissues as efficiently as possible.
It's a brilliant adaptation mechanism.
Wow. Okay, let's move out of the body and into the lab. Part 4. Lab math and quality control. I see numbers and my eyes start to glaze over, but this rule of 3 actually seems incredibly useful.
It's the #1 sanity check for anyone working in a hematology lab. You get a printout from a multi-million-dollar analyzer, but machines can be wrong, samples can be bad. The rule of 3 lets you know in about 2 seconds if the results are believable.
So walk me through it. What's the rule?
It's a simple, rough correlation. Your red blood cell count in millions times 3 should be approximately equal to your hemoglobin value.
Okay, RBC times 3 equals hemoglobin.
And then your hemoglobin value times 3 should be approximately equal to your hematocrit plus or minus 3%.
Hemoglobin times 3 equals hematocrit. Okay, let's do a real-world example. Say the machine tells me a patient's hemoglobin is 10.
Okay, so what should their hematocrit be?
10 times 3. It should be around 30%, maybe 27 to 33.
Exactly. Now, what if the machine says the hemoglobin is 10, but the hematocrit is 45%?
The math is broken. Something is wrong.
The math is broken, which means either the machine is malfunctioning, or more likely, something about the blood sample itself is interfering with one of the measurements.
And the notes give a great troubleshooting list for this. What's a common culprit?
A very common one is a lipemic sample.
Lipemic, from lipids, fat.
Yes. If your patient went to a diner and had a huge bacon cheeseburger and a milkshake right before their blood draw, their plasma can be so full of fat that it looks milky.
That's a very vivid image.
And that milky turbidity scatters the light that the machine uses to measure hemoglobin. It can't see through the sample properly, so it gives you a falsely high hemoglobin reading.
So the cheeseburger broke the rule of 3.
The cheeseburger broke the rule. The fix is to replace the fatty plasma with saline and rerun it.
What's another one? The notes mention cold agglutinin.
This one is fascinating. A cold agglutinin is an antibody that some people have that causes their red blood cells to clump together when they get below body temperature.
So when you draw the blood and it sits in a tube at room temp,
It cools down, the antibody activates, and the cells form these big grape-like clusters.
and how does that mess up the count?
Well, the machine is designed to count single cells as they pass through a laser. If a big clump of 20 cells goes through, the machine sees it as one single giant cell.
So your red blood cell count would be falsely low, In your cell size, the MCV would be falsely high.
Exactly. The rule of 3 would fail spectacularly. The fix: you just gently warm the sample in a 37-degree heat block for about 15 minutes, the clumps dissociate, and you run it again. Problem solved.
It really is detective work.
Hematology is almost entirely detective work.
Okay, speaking of the clues, let's talk about the first and most important ones we use to classify anemia, the indices, specifically MCV and MCHC.
These are the first things a doctor looks at. MCV stands for mean corpuscular volume. It's a simple measurement. How big, on average, are your red blood cells?
And the normal range is about 80 to 100 femtoliters.
Right. And this one number is like the sorting hat from Harry Potter. It immediately puts the anemia into one of 3 houses. If your MCV is less than 80, the cells are too small. That's microcytic anemia.
And if it's over 100?
The cells are too big. That's macrocytic anemia. And if you're anemic but the cells are a normal size, that's normocytic. This first step narrows down the list of possible causes by about 90%.
It's a diagnostic flowchart. So if my cells are microcytic, they're too small. What does that tell you?
Small, pale cells usually mean there's a problem making hemoglobin. The factory is missing a key ingredient. The number one cause, by far, is iron deficiency. You can't fill the bag if you don't have the stuffing.
And what if the cells are macrocytic, too big?
Big cells usually point to a problem with cell division, a DNA synthesis problem. The cell is growing, getting ready to divide, but it can't replicate its DNA correctly, so it never splits. It just gets bigger and bigger.
And what causes that?
The classic causes are vitamin B12 deficiency or folate deficiency, because those are essential for making DNA.
So size matters a lot.
In hematology, size is everything.
Okay, now we get to the part of the notes that I found the most visually stunning. Part 5, the Rogues Gallery. This is all about poikilocytosis,
Which is just the fancy Greek term for variation in shape. A healthy red blood cell is a beautiful, uniform, biconcave disc. They all look the same. But in disease states, that beautiful uniformity is lost, and you start seeing all these bizarre shapes.
and each shape is a clue, a fingerprint of a specific disease. Let's go through the list. First up, the most famous one, sickle cells.
Drepanocytes. The crescent moon or sickle-shaped cells that give sickle cell anemia its name.
I have to bring up the mnemonic from the study guide. For the mutation, it just says sexy Valine.
It's a classic. Medical students have a weird sense of humor. It's to remember that at the 6th position of the beta-globin protein, the normal amino acid, glutamic acid, is substituted by valine.
So the sexy is for 6, and Valine is the substitute.
And under low oxygen conditions, that one tiny change causes the hemoglobin molecules to polymerize into long, stiff rods that distort the cell into that rigid sickle shape.
Unbelievable. Okay, next on the list, target cells.
Podocytes. And they look exactly like a shooting target. A central red dot, a pale white ring, and then a red outer rim.
What causes that bullseye pattern?
It's an issue of membrane versus volume. The cell has too much cell membrane for the amount of hemoglobin inside, so the membrane kind of buckles in the middle, creating that central dot. You see it classically in liver disease and in various hemoglobin disorders like thalassemia and hemoglobin C disease.
Next up, schistocytes. The name alone sounds nasty.
They are very bad news. Schistocytes are red cell fragments. They look like shards of glass, little triangles, helmet shapes.
Fragments implies the cells were physically broken.
They were. This is a sign of what we call microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, which means something inside the blood vessels is physically shredding the red blood cells as they pass by.
What on earth could do that inside your own body?
A couple of things. A defective artificial heart valve can act like a tiny blender, chopping up cells. Or, more systemically, a condition like DIC-disseminated intravascular coagulation, where tiny clots form all over your small blood vessels.
So it was like a web of razor wire stretched across the capillaries.
That's a perfect, if terrifying, analogy. The cells are sliced apart trying to get through. Seeing schistocytes is a medical emergency.
Wow. Okay, let's move to one with a slightly less terrifying name, bite cells.
These are great. They look exactly like someone took a bite out of a cookie. There's a perfect semicircle missing from the edge of the cell.
Who's the cookie monster? Who's taking the bite?
The spleen is the cookie monster.
The spleen again. Our quality control inspector.
Exactly. This happens in a condition called G6PD deficiency. In these patients, oxidative stress can cause their hemoglobin to denature and precipitate into a little solid lump inside the cell. That lump is called a Heinz body.
Okay.
So the red cell with this little Heinz body lump tries to pass through the narrow passageways of the spleen. The spleen's macrophages see that lump and recognize it as abnormal. They say, you can't have that in here.
And they just bite it out.
They literally pluck the inclusion out of the cell membrane, taking a little piece of membrane with it. The cell gets sealed back up and sent on its way, but with a permanent scar. A bite mark.
That is one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Burr cells.
Or echinocytes. These are cells with very uniform, spiky projections all over their surface. They look like a sea urchin.
And what do they tell us?
Classically, we see them in patients with severe kidney failure uremia. The idea is that the toxic waste products that build up in the blood alter the cell membrane and cause it to crinkle up into the spiky shape.
And what about teardrop cells? Dacryocytes.
The teardrop cell tells a very sad and poignant story about the bone marrow itself.
How so?
You see these in a condition called myelofibrosis. Myelo for marrow, fibrosis for scarring. It's a disease where the bone marrow, which should be soft and spongy, gets progressively replaced by thick, dense scar tissue.
So the factory floor turns into concrete.
A great analogy. Now imagine a brand new red blood cell that's just finished maturing. It has to leave the marrow and squeeze into the bloodstream. But instead of an easy exit, it has to force its way through this dense, fibrous scar tissue.
It would get stretched and deformed on its way out.
Exactly. It gets pinched and pulled, and the cell is permanently stretched into that characteristic teardrop shape as it escapes. It's literally crying on its way out of its home.
That is an incredibly powerful visual. Okay, two more shapes. Rouleau.
French for roll. This is when red cells stack on top of each other like a roll of coins.
Why do they do that? I thought they were supposed to repel each other.
They are. Normally, red cells have a net negative charge on their surface, so they push each other away. But in diseases where there's a huge amount of excess protein in the blood plasma, like multiple myeloma, that protein coats the red cells and neutralizes the charge.
So they get sticky.
They get sticky, and they form these stacks.
And finally, the crystals. The notes show pictures of crystals inside the cells. Hemoglobin C crystals.
Yes, in hemoglobin C disease, the abnormal hemoglobin can actually crystallize inside the red cell. It forms these blunt, rod-shaped crystals that are often described as looking like the Washington Monument.
A little obelisk inside a red blood cell.
Exactly. And then there's hemoglobin SC disease, a combination, which forms a crystal that looks like a hand-in-glove. It's very distinctive.
It's amazing that you could pretty much make a diagnosis just by looking at the shape of a single cell on a piece of glass.
It's the visual fingerprint of the disease.
Now, before we classify the anemias, let's just touch on the other inclusions. We mentioned Heinz bodies, but there are others.
Right. What's inside the cell matters too. Normally, a mature red cell is empty, but sometimes cellular debris gets left behind.
Like Howell-Jolly bodies.
These are little round purple dots of leftover DNA from the nucleus that didn't get expelled properly. Normally, the spleen is very good at finding these and plucking them out.
If you see a lot of them.
It's a big clue that the patient either had their spleen surgically removed or their spleen isn't working properly for some reason. It's a sign of asplenia.
Okay. What about basophilic stippling?
This looks like the entire cell has been sprinkled with fine blue-purple pepper. Those little dots are aggregates of leftover RNA. And while you can see it in a few conditions, its number one classic association is lead poisoning.
Lead poisoning?
Yes. Lead interferes with the enzymes that break down RNA, so it accumulates. If a doctor sees basophilic stippling on a peripheral smear, especially in a child, checking for lead exposure is one of the first things they'll do.
That's a huge connection. And finally, Pappenheimer bodies.
These are little irregular clusters of iron granules. You see them in diseases where iron metabolism has gone wrong, like sideroblastic anemia, where iron gets into the cell but can't be incorporated into hemoglobin properly. It just piles up in the mitochondria.
It's like the assembly line is backed up at the very last step.
Exactly.
Okay, let's put it all together. Part 6. Anemia classifications. This feels like the practical application. We have all these clues. How do we solve the case?
We go right back to that first decision point from our sorting hat, the MCV, cell size.
The flowchart.
It's a flowchart. Step 1. Is the cell small, normal, or big? Let's start with microcytic, small cells. MCV less than 80.
Okay, my cells are small. What's on your differential diagnosis?
The first question is always about the ingredients for hemoglobin. Is there an iron deficiency? We check iron studies. If iron is low, that's your answer. It's the most common cause.
What if the iron levels are normal?
If the iron is normal but the cells are still small, now we're thinking about other problems with hemoglobin production. Is it a thalassemia, where you can't make the globin protein chains correctly? Or is it something like sideroblastic anemia, where the iron can't be used?
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's go to the other extreme. Macrocytic anemia, big cells, MCV over 100.
Big cells mean a division problem, so we ask, is it a DNA synthesis problem? We check vitamin B12 and folate levels. If one of those is low, we have our answer, megaloblastic anemia.
And if B12 and folate are normal?
Then it's a non-megaloblastic macrocytosis, and we start looking at other causes, like liver disease or hypothyroidism, which can cause the cell membranes to be larger.
And what about the one in the middle? Normocytic. Normal size, but you still don't have enough of them.
That's often the trickiest. The factory is producing cells that look okay, they're the right size. There just aren't enough of them in circulation.
So what could cause that?
A few big categories. One, you're losing them faster than you can make them, like in acute blood loss from trauma. Two, the factory is just shut down. This is aplastic anemia, where the bone marrow fails. Or three, the factory is fine, but it's not getting the order to produce.
What do you mean?
The kidneys produce a hormone called erythropoietin, or EPO, which is the signal that tells the bone marrow to make red cells. In chronic kidney failure, you don't make EPO, so the marrow just sits idle.
So it could be a production problem, a loft problem, or a signaling problem.
Exactly.
I want to circle back to thalassemia for a second. The notes go into some detail about alpha versus beta thalassemia.
Right. Thalassemia is a quantitative problem. Unlike sickle cell, where the protein is made incorrectly, in thalassemia, you just don't make enough of a perfectly normal protein.
And we have alpha globin chains and beta globin chains that make up adult hemoglobin. So alpha thalassemia is a problem with the alpha chains.
Correct. And it's usually caused by gene deletions. Humans normally have 4 alpha globin genes, which gives us some redundancy.
The backup system.
A backup system. So if you have 1 gene deleted, you're perfectly fine. A silent carrier. If you have 2 genes deleted, you have mild microcytic anemia. If you have 3 genes deleted, it gets serious. That's called hemoglobin H disease.
And if you have all 4 alpha genes deleted?
That is a catastrophic condition called hydrops fetalis. The fetus is completely unable to make any functional hemoglobin.
Because you need alpha chains for both fetal and adult hemoglobin.
You do. Without any alpha chains, the fetus makes abnormal hemoglobins that hold onto oxygen so tightly they never release it to the tissues. It's a condition that is incompatible with life.
That's tragic. What about beta thalassemia?
That's a defect in producing the beta chains. In beta thalassemia major, you make no beta chains at all. So the body does something clever to try and compensate.
What's the workaround?
It can't make the main adult hemoglobin, hemoglobin A, because that requires beta chains. So it ramps up production of the minority hemoglobins. It keeps making fetal hemoglobin, hemoglobin F, and it makes more hemoglobin A2.
So you look for high levels of A2 and F.
That's the diagnostic hallmark. You see these huge spikes of HbA2 and HbF on a hemoglobin electrophoresis. It's the body's last-ditch effort to build a working delivery truck using spare parts.
All right, this is amazing. Let's get into the home stretch. Part 7, the defense force. We've spent so much time on the red cell delivery trucks, but the blood is also full of a security detail, the white blood cells.
The leukocytes. And looking at the breakdown of which type of white cell is elevated, the differential is like checking a police blotter. It tells you what kind of crime is being committed in the body.
Okay, let's run through the main suspects. Neutrophils.
Neutrophils are the Marines, the first responders. They are bacterial assassins. If the neutrophil count is high, you are thinking bacterial infection 99% of the time.
Lymphocytes.
Lymphocytes are the special ops. They handle more specific threats, primarily viral infections.
And then make a point of mentioning atypical lymphs.
Yes. If you see big, angry, reactive-looking lymphocytes on the smear, that is the absolute classic sign of infectious mononucleosis caused by the Epstein-Barr virus.
The kissing disease.
The kissing disease. The lymphocytes are so activated, they look stretched out and angry.
Okay, what about eosinophils? They look cool in the pictures with the bright pink granules.
They're beautiful cells, and their claim to fame is a duo, allergies and parasites.
So if I have terrible hay fever, my eosinophil count might be up.
It will be. And if you have a parasitic worm infection, it will be sky high. They are designed to kill things that are too big to be eaten by a single cell.
And monocytes.
Monocytes are the big cleanup crew. They mature into macrophages. They tend to increase in more chronic infections, things like tuberculosis or syphilis, and also in some malignancies.
There's one more specific white cell finding in the notes. Hypersegmented neutrophils. What's that about?
This is a fantastic clue that ties back to what we were talking about earlier. A normal neutrophil has a nucleus with about 3 to 5 lobes connected by thin strands.
Oh, well.
A hypersegmented neutrophil is one with 6, 7, even 8 lobes. And it is a screaming red flag for megaloblastic anemia.
The B12 and folate deficiency.
Yes. That same DNA synthesis problem that makes the red cells big also affects the white cells. The neutrophil's nucleus tries to divide but can't do it properly, so it just keeps adding extra lobes. It's one of the most specific microscopic findings there is.
And finally, the notes just touch on it, but they mention leukemia.
Just a brief mention of ONL, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. This is the most common childhood cancer. And what you see in the blood are blasts.
Blasts of the baby cells, right. The really early precursors.
The rubroblasts of the white cell world. They should never be in the peripheral blood. They belong in the marrow. If you see blasts circulating in the blood, it means the factory's control systems are completely broken, and it's just spewing out cancerous, unfinished cells. It is the definition of leukemia.
It's just staggering. The amount of information that is packed into a single drop of blood it's a universe.
It really is. We've gone from the migrating factories in the fetus to the specific enzyme chemistry behind a werewolf to the shape of a cell telling you a patient has a bad heart valve.
When you put it all together, you realize blood isn't just some passive fluid. It's a living, breathing, responsive organ. It changes based on the temperature, what you ate, your genetics, where you live, and it leaves a trail of breadcrumbs for us to follow.
For anyone who knows how to read the slides, those breadcrumbs tell the entire story. It's the diary of the body, written in a language of cells and molecules.
And I want to leave our listeners thinking about that werewolf connection again, because it's such a powerful illustration of the scientific process. We used to see someone with photosensitivity, facial changes, and red urine, and we invented a monster to explain it.
We saw it through the lens of fear and superstition.
And now we see the same patient, and we see an enzyme deficiency. We see porphyria. It completely shifts the perspective from fear to understanding, from condemnation to compassion.
That is the ultimate goal of pathology, really.
It is. So here's the final question I want to leave you with to think about. What are the werewolf legends of our time? What are the conditions we're currently explaining with stigma or myth, maybe in mental health or chronic pain or autoimmune disease? They're really just complex biochemical pathways we haven't decoded yet. What mysteries are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to understand the chemistry behind the legend?
That is a very profound question. I suspect we will find biological and chemical roots for many things we currently consider to be purely psychological.
I think you're right. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was fun.